Well, welcome to this COVID-19 pandemic update for the St. John's Parish. As we enter the level 4 phase of lockdown, with the attempt to flatten the curve, we in reality have seen things move a lot faster than I think many expected. We had a very early lockdown resulting in a remote Easter, a far more online society and greater impact on jobs, the economy, and provision of food and shelter, particularly for those that are vulnerable. And as we enter this new phase of amended lockdown, it was felt that a medical update would be helpful, following on from the short presentation pre-lockdown, when we were still wondering if and when it might happen. But in addition to the medical update, the short video perspective will provide important information on what is happening in the ground in communities, how the lockdown is affecting food security, jobs, and particularly who the vulnerable are in our community. And we hope that sharing this information will help equip the parish to tackle the next phase with wisdom and collective discernment as where best we can help. Richard will be sharing from the medical perspective and Craig from the perspective of what is happening in economically under-resourced communities across the country, and particularly in our immediate parish. Both critically important as we move out of our homes and engage with the effect of the virus, but also the lockdown.
Thanks, Richard. It's been quite a month. A friend and colleague, Lusanda Mashua from RZIM, said to me last week that she feels like her life is on pause at lightning pace. And I know in my world and my work, as is the case with many of us, there is so much happening, so much intensity, deepened levels of collaboration and engagement, and a very deep sense of urgency in the face of the crisis that is already happening, but maybe even more so that which is to come. And so, Richard, where are we in terms of this pandemic right now?
Well, Craig, as we enter this new phase now of lockdown, we are in a phase that's transitioning, and every day we get new numbers. You may have seen this presentation. This was done by Salim Abdul Karim for the Department of Health and for the ministers, to show the varying patterns across the globe as to what's happened with this pandemic and how different countries have seen very different things. So if we look in South Africa, if one looks at the numbers curve, and I'm going to come back to this, as it peaked here, this is roughly where lockdown happened. And the numbers are going to increase, and so there's a panic each time the numbers go up, but that's normal. But what's important is when one looks at this other graph, this is the number of new cases per day, which was going up. And so we've seen this flattening in that there are less people per day being infected than we originally were experiencing. And so the lockdown from that perspective has happened. But I think many people might have felt that now that the lockdown is over, things are going to get better. But in reality, things are likely still to get worse. And so as we enter the partial lockdown phase, these are the numbers as of yesterday, a total of 6,300 cases, but that's going up, as I said, every day. Thankfully, many, many people have recovered, and we have quite a low death toll at the moment, but obviously every life lost is a life lost. And we similarly have significant impact in relation to our communities, in relation to food and other resources. And so this is probably the most important slide really from a health perspective to explain what's happened. If you look at, again, this is the number of deaths. This is roughly where lockdown happened. And what we've managed to do is avoid the rapid increase of cases. And so we've delayed the time to where we have the cases that we do have. And this has given the healthcare system opportunity to get prepared. It's given us an opportunity to get systems in place. So we've delayed things, which has been very important, but we are still seeing more cases, and we are still going to see more cases. So the fact that lockdown is being eased doesn't mean we are out of the woods yet from a healthcare perspective. And I think the most important thing for everyone to realize is that social distancing is still critically important, that hand hygiene is also critically important, and that this is still a long road ahead from the healthcare side. But Craig, you and I have been having conversations intermittently about the different areas that we work in, and you've highlighted to me that apart from the healthcare side, this coronavirus has had significant impact on communities, particularly those in vulnerable communities, not only on job security, but also on food and income. And so I'm going to hand over to you to chat to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, thanks, Richard. I think we've all probably seen and heard news reports of the growing impact of particularly food insecurity across the country. There are lots of images of lines that are literally kilometers long of people waiting for food parcels, along with concerns about looting and theft from food stores and trucks. And perhaps it's worth looking at a couple of stats pre-COVID in the city of Cape Town in particular. This is a stat that looks at basic access to necessities in the city of Cape Town, and these are pre-COVID figures. But just wanted to point out on the far right-hand side, it talks about people with access to cash income, and I just want to start there. That just over 40%, so 1.5 million or so people on a normal basis in Cape Town are experiencing some or extreme lack of cash income. Obviously, after 5 weeks of lockdown, that number is significantly increased. And so if you're a wage earner in a small business, if you're a small business owner, if you're a church leader in a poor community, if you are someone who does itinerant work, your cash income, the money that you earn to pay for the other necessities is gone. And so you end up with a situation that all those other access points, enough food to eat, enough medicine, enough electricity, enough fuel to cook food, will become problematic. And certainly we're seeing a growth of people requesting and asking for those kinds of things. The second slide to pay attention to is linked to this, and that is people's food insecurity in the city of Cape Town. And in the city of Cape Town, just under 50% of the city were considered food secure before COVID. So around 55% of the city experienced various levels of food insecurity, and that number is increasing. So all of those considered food insecure. So the yellow, the grey, the orange, all of those are experiencing increasing levels of food insecurity. And then it's pushing into the blue as well, that people are finding that their access to food is reduced. The gap that is particularly noticeable right now are not those that would be generally considered to be the poorest of the poor, because many of them are covered by SASSA grants. What we're seeing right now is the people who aren't covered by SASSA grants and don't have access to other safety nets. And as a result, you're seeing this significant increase in food insecurity. And alongside of that, then a challenge to social cohesion and access to all sorts of other basic necessities. And it's certainly a big concern as we speak to church leaders and as I work with church leaders all across the city. That gets named over and over again as the primary thing people are experiencing now. We know that in the months to come, additional pressures are going to be placed on from a medical perspective, from health, from dealing with funerals and deaths. But right now, what people are experiencing is food insecurity. And the situation is challenging, but I want to show just one picture. It is challenging and it's critical across the country, across the city. But I also want to say that all over the city, what is happening is that local communities are making a plan. Local communities are organizing themselves. They're taking the agency they have and they're making up plans to address the challenge for their neighbors. This picture could be taken in many, many communities, but this picture is taken in Manenberg. And in Manenberg, there are now over 23 street committees that have been activated by a variety of people, including Jonathan Jansen, who many of us know. And they are identifying and feeding and caring for the vulnerable amongst them in the best ways that they can. They're doing that without support from government, without support from big centralized funding. They are working it out. And so in the face of this crisis, there is this sense that like it's too big for any one of us, and it really is too big for any one of us. But there's also this recognition that communities across the city are, and churches are organizing and playing a role in that, and that's something we can do. In Genadendal in Greyton is another community where people have formed teams and are caring for the hungry, including the distribution of seed for planting and looking in anticipation to harvesting season later in the year. And in Khayelitsha, there's a church network through the Great Commission and Pastor Aaron McKeely who are providing meals to over 250 people every day. These people are under tremendous strain, but they are taking the initiative and doing what they believe God has called them to do. I can repeat the stories over and over again, but we can't sit back and leave them to face this on their own. But they also aren't waiting for us to solve their challenges. This challenge, I think, is going to be faced by local responses that are coordinated together. And so I think the other thing to say is that coordination is beginning to emerge in some fantastic new ways between civil society, the church, and business. Initiatives around healthcare, food insecurity, caring for the vulnerable are growing in momentum. And I think they're going to stand us in good stead for the months to come. That this space we've given to the healthcare system has also given civil society the opportunity to plan and prepare and form collaborations, which are going to stand us in strong stead. For those of us involved in addressing poverty, we're aware that this is the beginning of a long road ahead. And for all of us, I think this is a marathon and not a sprint. Thanks, Richard.
Yeah, thanks, Craig. I think, as we sort of kind of breathe a sigh of relief that lockdown's over, I think we've realized that level 4, 3, 2, and 1 are still going to be quite a long road ahead of us. And that the work really is just beginning for many, particularly in the healthcare sector. But also the issue of picking up the pieces of lost jobs, financial challenges, finding food is certainly the new reality for many people. And I guess this new reality is going to be different for all of us in different ways, but also provides us an opportunity to extend God's love and support to those around us. And I think as you've mentioned, the issue of this is going to be on the ground community, in addition to support from national government. But those of us on the ground shouldn't be waiting for national government and big organizations to do things. We really should be clubbing together and working alongside each other. Any last comments from your side, Craig?
Yeah, and then keeping that basic right of what you mentioned. Yeah, thanks, Richard. I think then at the same time, keeping those basics that you mentioned earlier, that physical distancing seems to be something that the data points to as being critical in us being able to be safe and more capable of riding out the storm, and that we shouldn't lose sight of that in the midst of other things. And perhaps, as we're saying at the warehouse quite a bit, to focus on physical distancing, but deepen social solidarity. And in that, maybe we'll keep safe and discover a new future for ourselves. Thank you.
Great. Well, thanks to Craig for joining me on this. We hope it's been of help. If it has, please let the relevant people know, and we can always do this again if it will be of value to all of you. Thanks again. Cheers.
Ciao.